If you are looking for an aggressive and a tricky line against the London system, then congratulations to clicking this video, as if you manage to watch until the end, you are going to equip with a lifetime solution to lock the London Tower. After d4, I propose you should start with knight to f6, and there are two ways white can enter into the London system, and amongst them, if we continue with knight to f3, then I propose you should respond with d5, and in my chess trap 17 I have shown the whole repertoire how to handle this line effectively. However, by far the most popular choice is bishop to f4, where white is remain flexible, and this time around we are going to respond with c5, and after this, against all of 5 major alternatives by white, black is simply well prepared. So let's see each by turn and find out how we are going to tackle them. Starting from the bottom, let's start with knight to f3, and I think this is one of the easiest move, as black can simply capture on d4, setting up a small trap that if white continue with knight captures d4, then he instantly lose the piece with e5, as the simple tactical point is bishop takes e5 runs into this queen check, where black nabbed the whole piece. So nope, white can't play knight takes d4 here. That means he has to play queen captures d4. And after this, even though knight c6 looks very logical here, I propose this nice move d6, where black threat is very obvious, e5 and nabbing the piece one more time. And these queen checks are always useless because it just helps black to develop the pieces. So by far, white has chosen the move queen to d1. But this makes black life very easy with queen to b6. Okay, white has two options, and amongst them, if we continue with queen to c1, then after e5, bishop to e3 and queen to c7, we have a very easy Najdorf Sicilian kind of setup, where as I have highlighted over here, black has a very simple piece layout, and don't forget, white has completely jammed up his e-pawn, so he's not controlling the center and his pieces are not ideally placed. If you look at the engine evaluation here, it is already given -1 to black, which is close to a pawn advantage. The second option, b3, has been highestly chosen here, but I'm afraid these severely weaken the dark squares, and we will jump on it immediately with knight to e4, setting up a small trap that if white continue with the most natural move, e3, then he can lose the game instantly with this nice move. Yup, g5. What a move. Well, white has 3 choices, and amongst them, once again, capturing on g5 is a pretty bad idea, as after the end of the sequence, knight takes, bishop takes, and this queen check nab the piece. So capturing the g5 is right out of the equation. How about countering this knight with bishop to d3? Well, this time around, even worse news for white, as black has this lethal sacrifice on f2, which completely bamboozled the white camp. The point is, white has to take this knight, and after that, when we recapture the piece, white e-pawn is pinned, and with the natural sequence rook to e1, pawn takes e3, Nope, white can't take it because of bishop to h6. So king has to move away. But then we can play bishop to g7, forcing yet another passive move. And the end result is, this time around, we are getting 2 pawns where white king is completely misplaced. Last but not least, what happens if your opponent continue here with bishop to g3? Well, black choices are very obvious. Bishop to g7, attacking the rook. Knight to d4 looks the only logical response. But after queen to b4 check, knight to d2, and the move h5, where black has a very simple threat to nabbing this piece, and it doesn't matter however white responds, whether h3 or f3. Let's say in my recent game, my 2000 rated opponent continue with h3, saving the bishop but actually losing the game. How? Well, now comes a very simple sequence. Knight takes g3, pawn takes g3, completely destroying the white pawn structure, and on top of everything, we have this queen to c3 attacking on e3, so that white has to play this pity move, king to f2, whereupon after the following sequence, bishop takes d4, pawn takes d4, queen takes d4, king to e1, queen check, and at the end black gobble up yet another pawn and come out as a complete dominating position. In fact, in my game, my opponent really get frustrated and he continue with queen to e2. And after this check, he should have moved the king, but queen to f2 has been played, which is a big time disaster as queen to e5 nabbed the rook in the corner. The second move I want to consider is d capture c5. And I think this is probably the easiest one, as black can play knight to a6, not only regaining the pawn back, but get a very good position just within the opening stage. Kindly note that queen to d4 doesn't stop us, as queen to a5, and indeed black get the pawn back. So a sample line can goes like this: e3, black get the pawn back, and now very simple plan, you go ahead with the dragon structure, where just like Sicilian, the half open c file gives black enough counterplay in the game. For example, let's see a common piece layout: knight to f3, d6. There is no point of playing c3 now, so white should play knight to c3, where g6, bishop to c4, bishop to g7, and when both the side castle. Look at this position, guys. Not only this d6 pawn has restrict white major pieces, but once we move the bishop out and put our major artillery on the c file, I think it is only black who can have a lot of fun in this line. And that is the reason why this line has not been chosen by the good players. And as per the current engine analysis, it already gives black a comfortable advantage. The third move I want to consider is d5, and I think this is the one move which stops me earlier to play this line, because I don't play Banco and Bononi, and this put me off to play this line. However, to my surprise, when I done some extensive analysis, I found out that you don't need to know these lines, as black has some surprising idea, starting with queen to b6. Okay, white has few choices, and amongst them he cannot play queen to c1 as the d5 pawn drops. Knight to c3 enters into the main line. However, you need to know why white can't play b3 here, as it looks very logical. Well, the simple answer is this check wins the pawn on the spot. We have a forcing sequence here. Bishop to d2, queen to d4, knight to c3 is forced, but then we can chop on d5, and not only black come up with a clear pawn advantage, but the big tactical point is when white plays knight to b5, looks like a very good move. We can calmly play queen to e4 and meeting the move c4 with this counter-attacking move a6, where the end result is completely fine for the black. You can go through the sample line from the PGN where I have shown that even after the base sequence, black opening pawn advantage cannot be denied. So that is how you should play against the move b3 here. Well, now let's look at the main line, knight to c3. And to my surprise, all the books and videos has only considered the move queen captures b2, whereupon bishop to d2, and white gets some initiative later on in the middle game with e4 and f4. But why bother about all these things where black can play this very tricky move, e6. And I think after this, white is in a trouble. How? Let's check out. There are two major choices here, and amongst them e4 has been highestly played. But I am afraid here black can unleash this tactical sacrifice. Just look at this, guys. Knight takes e4. What a move. Well, the big tactical point is after knight takes e4, black has this lethal check, and it doesn't matter however white plays, he has to give the piece back. For example, one grandmaster games continue here with knight to c3, but after simple queen captures f4, black obtained the whole pawn and the bishop pair and easily converted the full point. So nope, knight to c3 is a bad idea. The most accurate sequence here goes as follows. Queen to d2, queen captures e4, and now knight to e2, which sets up a small trap that if you take on d5 with the queen, then after the queen exchange, white can play knight to c3, and even though white is a pawn down, this position clearly favors the white. So I'm certainly not going to recommend that line. And instead of this, I recommend this straightforward approach, starting with d6. Well, of course, it gives the pawn back after the following sequence. Pawn takes e6, queen takes e6. And now white can't castle here because the a2 pawn drops. But what he can do is play the move rook to d1 and get his pawn back. Okay, no issues. We can play knight to c6, allowing white to take the pawn back. But the end result, queen captures a2. And although it looks scary for a moment as our king is stuck in the center, tactically this position is so good for the black. Let me show you how, as one of my recent game against a 2200 continue with queen captures c5. I took yet another pawn, and in the game my opponent played knight to d4, which turned out as a big time disaster because black has a simple refutation, queen to b4, exchanging the queen, and after c3, knight to c6, knight takes c6 and pawn takes c6, you can clearly see the downside of the whole transaction. Black has an outright passer on the a file, and with some careful play, I indeed managed to get the full point. So nope, knight to d4 is a bad idea by the white here. So how about c3 eliminating this check? Well, it has another downside, namely queen to b6. If the queen exchange, then black position is obviously better. So white should play queen to d6, stopping black to castle. However, just one move, bishop to e6, and you can easily see rook to d8 is coming up. And considering the engine evaluation, it is already giving a winning advantage to the black. Apart from rook to d1, white can also try here g3. But the following Grandmaster game gives you a great illustration how to handle such a scenario. Black plays knight to c6, bishop to g2, and now very nice move, knight to d4, stopping white to castle. So white responded with bishop to e3, blocking the e-file. But the net result is, after knight takes e2, queen takes e2, bishop to e7, and when both the side castle, it is pretty obvious that black emerged with a clear pawn advantage. The same story goes if your opponent continue with d captures e6, because after f takes e6, indeed black is threatening the move d5, and if white has to stop it, he has to play e4, which is again most popular. However, it runs into the same tactic which we have seen earlier. Yup, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen to b4 check, queen to d2, queen takes e4, knight to e2, and bishop to e7 gives black a comfortable pawn advantage. In fact, there is a game in the database where both the sides castle on the opposite side, and when white plays bishop to d6, black was more than happy to exchange pieces, bishop takes, queen takes, and then evacuate this queen with queen to c6, so that once she moved, you can easily play the move d5, and with the space in the center and extra pawn, black is clearly in the driver's seat.